They say time changes everything, but time has only made the walls of this house feel emptier. My name is Liana. I'm 48 years old, and for the last few years, I've lived in the shadow of silence. My husband, Mark, is 57. A strong man once, both physically and emotionally. Now, he's a flicker of who he used to be. A rare neurological condition has robbed him of clarity, of movement, of joy. I love him. I care for him. But sometimes love alone isn't enough when you're living with a ghost. My son, Daniel, is 26. Married for 3 years, and from the outside, he has everything: youth, a career, a beautiful wife. But I've heard it. In his voice. The tremor when he says, "I'm okay." The pause before he adds, "How are you, Mom?" Like he's holding back something he can't share with anyone else. And maybe he was waiting for me to ask. I'm the owner of a discreet little boutique in the city. A specialty toy shop for men and women. It's tasteful, classy, indulgent. A place where people go when they want to explore sides of themselves that rarely get air. I built that business from the ground up, not because I had a passion for it, but because I wanted to give people what I was always craving myself: connection, release, curiosity, without judgment. I test the products sometimes. Of course I do. But they don't fill the void. Not really. They scratch the surface of something far deeper, a hunger that pulses just beneath the skin. An ache for touch, yes, but also for presence. For someone to look into you like you're more than just a woman checking off the boxes of her day. Sometimes, late at night, I lie awake and think, what's the point of these toys if they only mask the need they're pretending to satisfy? Then one evening my phone rang. Daniel. His voice was different this time. Broken. Frayed at the edges. Mom, his breath caught. I think it's over. I didn't need to ask what he meant. I sat down slowly at the edge of my bed, heart pounding. She told me today. She's done. The divorce is happening. A silence stretched between us, and in it, I heard everything he wasn't saying. The quiet echo of disappointment, of years of trying to fix something that had long since cracked. The boy inside the man, still reaching for something solid. Can I come home? He asked. Of course, I whispered. You don't even have to ask. He arrived the next day with one suitcase and a look in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Lost, tired, vulnerable. He didn't cry. Daniel never cries. But I saw it in the way his hands hung loosely at his sides when I hugged him. He didn't let go for a long time. That first night, we sat in the kitchen. I made his favorite lemon rosemary chicken and we talked. Or mostly he talked. About the fights, the therapy sessions, the long nights on the couch pretending he was fine. And I listened. I always listened. I didn't realize until later that I had missed the sound of his voice in the house. I gave him the guest room, freshly made with pale gray sheets and a view of the garden he used to help me tend when he was a boy. He smiled when he saw it. I remember burying that dumb ceramic frog out there, he said, laughing softly. You were convinced it would grow into a real one, I replied. His eyes crinkled. It almost did. We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt like the years had melted away. But when I closed the door behind me that night, I felt something else. Something I couldn't name. Not guilt. Not confusion. Just awareness. Of the space between us. Of how tall he'd grown. Of the man he had become. And something deeper flickered. Something I didn't dare look at too closely. Quick insert moment. Say this gently, naturally in the flow. By the way, if you're listening to this story and you've made it this far, I want to know something. Tell me in the comments where you're from. Really, I mean it. I'm always fascinated by the little places people listen from. Tiny towns, big cities, somewhere quiet, somewhere wild. Wherever you are, I'd love to know. Back to the story. The days passed with ease. Too much ease. He cooked breakfast some mornings. We had coffee in the garden. He fixed a broken window latch in the kitchen without me asking. We talked late into the night sometimes, and I started to remember how deeply we understood each other.
Too deeply.
Then, one night, something shifted. I was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a glass of wine and my tablet, half working, half scrolling. He walked in from the shower, hair damp, wearing only loose flannel pants and a plain gray t-shirt that clung to him in all the wrong, or right, ways. He flopped down beside me, too close. But I didn't move. He glanced at my screen. Working again? I shrugged. More like browsing new inventory. He leaned over, eyes catching the screen. Do people really buy that? He asked, pointing at one of the newer pieces. A dark red model, sleek and silent. I laughed. You'd be surprised. He looked at me, and there was something in his expression. Something that made my breath catch. You ever use any of these? He asked quietly. I turned to him slowly, locking eyes. My mouth opened, but the words caught somewhere in my throat. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who I was in that moment. A mother, a woman, or someone hanging between both. I didn't answer him right away. His question, soft, quiet, laced with curiosity, lingered in the air like the aftertaste of something too sweet and too strong. He wasn't trying to provoke. It didn't feel like teasing. It felt genuine. I sipped my wine, keeping my gaze on the screen, trying to summon a casual tone I didn't feel. Of course I've used them. I own the place, after all. Daniel gave a half smile.
Right.
That makes sense. But his eyes didn't move from my face. I could feel them. Watching. Sorry, he added after a pause, glancing away. That was probably weird to ask. I should have said yes. Should have told him it was inappropriate. Laughed it off, changed the subject. But instead, I found myself saying, not weird. You're an adult. And honestly, I'd rather you ask me than learn from some anonymous video. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and in his silence, something passed between us. Something dangerous. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the moment over and over. The softness in his voice, the way he had leaned closer, the scent of clean soap still lingering in the air after he left the room. It wasn't just that he had asked. It was the fact that I hadn't wanted him to stop. Over the next few days, things returned to a fragile kind of normal. We danced around each other with too much care. He helped around the house. I cooked, cleaned, worked late in the shop. We talked, laughed, shared old memories. But beneath it all was a tension that pulsed like a second heartbeat. Late one evening, I found him in the kitchen. He was barefoot, shirtless, standing in front of the open refrigerator, the faint hum of the appliance the only sound in the room. The dim light cast shadows across his chest, his silhouette outlined in gold and silver. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped inside, arms crossed, leaning lightly against the doorframe. Can't sleep? I asked. He turned, surprised but not embarrassed. You either? I shook my head. Too much on my mind. He closed the fridge and grabbed 2 bottles of sparkling water, handing me one. We sat at the kitchen table, lit only by the under-cabinet lights. A soft, muted glow. The kind of lighting that made everything feel like a secret. I've been thinking about what you said, he said suddenly, voice low. I looked up. What did I say? He hesitated, then smiled faintly. That you'd rather I ask you things. I swallowed.
Yes, I meant that.
He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So, if I asked you more, you wouldn't shut me down? That depends on what you ask. His eyes didn't leave mine. What do you do when the toys don't work anymore? When it's not about relief, but something else? The air between us tightened. You mean when it's about wanting to be seen? I whispered. Held? Needed. He nodded slowly.
Yeah.
I should have told him to go to bed. Should have changed the subject. But instead, I think we all want that, I said. And I think most people don't know how to ask for it. He nodded, eyes flickering to my hands on the table, then back to my face. You deserve it, he said, almost too quiet. Whatever it is you're missing. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because in that moment, I saw something in his gaze that undid me. Not pity, not confusion, but something dangerously close to understanding. And then he stood, gave me a soft smile, and walked away, leaving me alone with a heart that was suddenly beating far too fast. The days that followed felt different. Subtly, quietly, but undeniably different. Daniel lingered in rooms a little longer. His glances weren't rushed anymore. He no longer looked away when I caught him watching. Instead, he held my gaze like he was waiting for something, permission maybe, or acknowledgement. But I didn't give either.
Not yet.
Because I was still trying to tell myself a story. A safe one. A mother welcomes her son home after heartbreak. She comforts him. She listens. They reconnect. But this wasn't that story anymore. This was something else. One afternoon, I was sitting on the edge of the bed folding laundry, lost in thought, when he appeared in the doorway. You look tired, he said gently. I blinked up, surprised. That obvious? He walked in, sat beside me, and began folding a towel, almost without thinking, like he belonged in that moment. In my space. You do too much, he said. I see it. I gave him a tired smile. There's no one else to do it. I'm here, he replied softly. There was something in his voice, something new. Not the voice of a son reassuring his mother, but of a man quietly offering himself to someone he saw, not as fragile, but as worthy. I said nothing, but I felt my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with exhaustion. Later that night, we ended up on the porch together. It had started to rain lightly, just enough to scent the air with petrichor. He brought out a blanket and draped it over my shoulders without saying a word, then settled next to me. I don't know how long we sat there. We talked about little things at first. Old family vacations. The time he broke his arm climbing the neighbor's tree. But then the conversation shifted. I don't think I ever really loved her, he said suddenly. I turned to him. What do you mean? I think I wanted to. I tried to.
But she never saw me.
Not really. She was in love with the version of me that existed on paper, successful, responsible, easy to explain to her friends. But she didn't want the real me. The me who's messy. The me who asks too many questions. The me who he stopped. Who what? I asked gently. His eyes met mine. The me who wants to feel something real. With someone who actually knows me. The silence that followed was no longer just silence. It was loaded. With memory. With meaning. With that invisible thread between us tightening by the second. I reached out, rested my hand on his knee, not in a motherly gesture, but something else. Something quiet and anchoring. I know you, I said. And I meant it. Not just the boy he had been, but the man he was becoming. He placed his hand over mine. I know you too, he whispered. We didn't say more that night. We didn't have to.
But the air had changed.
The unspoken was now undeniable. Not acted upon, but acknowledged. Felt. Shared. The next morning, something gentle bloomed between us, like a pact had been made.
He brought me coffee in bed.
Sat beside me while I answered work emails. Walked with me to the market and carried the bags. Nothing grand, but everything he did felt like devotion. He wasn't just staying with me anymore. He was showing up, choosing me, and I was letting him. That evening, the house felt unusually quiet. There was no music, no TV humming in the background, just the faint ticking of the old wall clock and the soft hiss of rain against the windows. Daniel was in the living room, curled on the couch with one of my old books. The kind I used to read before sleep had become elusive. He looked peaceful, But when I passed by with a folded throw blanket in my hands, he looked up at me with that same soft intensity he had been carrying for days. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, without hesitation. I froze. It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them.
Calm.
Steady. Like he had rehearsed it in his mind 100 times, but it still came out pure. I shook my head, half laughing, trying to shift the moment. "I'm in a robe and slippers." He closed the book gently. Still. My breath caught. I stood there longer than I should have. "Come sit," he added.
And I did.
Not at the far end of the couch, not in the chair across from him, but beside him. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. Close enough to feel the warmth of him. I reached for the book in his lap, more to distract myself than to read, but his hand gently caught mine. "I've been thinking about you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My pulse surged. "Not just as my mom," he added quickly, "but as you. The woman. The person I admire. The one who never stops showing up for everyone else, even when no one shows up for her." I turned to him, unsure what to say. He continued, "I know you've been alone for a long time. That dad hasn't been able to be a partner to you. That those toys you sell, they aren't about fun. Not really. They're about filling space." I blinked, stunned by his clarity. "And maybe," he said, voice trembling slightly, "maybe what you need isn't more silence or more pretending. Maybe you just need someone who sees you,
Who wants to be here with you?"
My heart was in my throat. "I shouldn't be saying this," he added, "but I don't want to keep it in anymore. I want to be the one who's there for you. Not because I pity you, but because I feel this. I need this." And just like that, the dam cracked. I turned fully toward him. He was trembling just slightly, not afraid but exposed, like he'd laid something sacred at my feet. I reached up and touched his cheek. His eyes fluttered shut. "Daniel," I breathed. He opened his eyes again. "If this is wrong, tell me. I'll never cross a line you don't want crossed. But if there's even a part of you that feels it too." I didn't let him finish. I leaned forward, my forehead touching his, breath mingling with breath, hearts racing in sync. And in that still, aching silence, we let go. He pulled me gently into his arms. And I melted. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't wild. It was tender.
Right.
His arms wrapped around me like shelter, like a promise. And then, softly, reverently, he kissed me. A slow, lingering kiss. The kind that said everything we hadn't dared to voice. When we finally pulled apart, I stayed there in his arms, not wanting to move. He held me tighter and whispered against my ear, "Now you don't need your toys when you have me."